35-year-old Sarah Mitchell and her two young children, when they were thrown out onto the street with their belongings on that cold January day, no one dared to help them. But a man who emerged from the crowd intervened in the situation, and when estate agent Marcus Thornfield learned who he was, he nearly had a heart attack. Because that man was Keir Starmer, and the events that began that day shook all of Britain. In London's Kensington district, on Pembridge Road, adorned with elegant examples of Victorian architecture, no one was yet prepared for the drama that would unfold on a cold January morning. It was 9:30 a.m., and the thermometer read -2 degrees. Snow had been falling since the night before, covering the streets with a thin white blanket. The wind was making mournful sounds through the bare branches of trees, rattling the window panes. In this elite neighborhood, where the average house value was £2 million, stood the prestigious office of Thornfield and Associates Estate Agency. The office, housed in a renovated Victorian building, drew attention with its glass storefronts and modern interior design. Inside were marble floors, leather armchairs, and expensive property photographs covering the walls. The company's owner, Marcus Thornfield, 48 years old, considered himself one of Britain's most successful property investors. A graduate of Winchester College and Oxford University, Thornfield was the son of a wealthy banking family. From childhood, he had learned the importance of money and status and had been taught to view empathy as weakness. He defined his work as simply making money, feeling no empathy beyond seeing tenants as income sources.
Thornfield's business philosophy was simple but merciless: maximum profit, minimum expense. Tenant rights, repair requests, or social responsibilities were merely obstacles that reduced his profitability, in his view. Having been in this sector for 15 years, Thornfield owned over 200 properties across London, with an average annual rental income of £8 million. But this success came at the cost of becoming increasingly harsh and ruthless toward his tenants. Thornfield's property empire consisted mostly of struggling families, single-parent families, elderly couples, immigrant families. All were people trying to survive in London's expensive rental market. Thornfield viewed them as risk factors, treating them mercilessly at the first sign of financial difficulty. That morning, Thornfield was in a particularly irritable mood. A report he had received the previous month stated that his tenant, Sarah Mitchell, living in one of his 3-story Victorian houses in Ladbroke Grove, was 3 months behind on her rent payments. The total delay of £4,500 had exceeded Thornfield's tolerance limit. His lawyers had initiated legal eviction proceedings the day before, and today he had decided to carry out the physical eviction. Sarah Mitchell, 35 years old, was a woman fighting for survival. Her childhood had been spent in Manchester, and after dropping out of high school, she had worked various jobs. She had come to London in her 20s, where she met and married Michael. She lived alone with her 8-year-old son Jake and 5-year-old daughter Emma. Michael had fled from his paternal responsibilities after the children were born, and had been inconsistent with child support payments and had disappeared completely 2 years ago.
The house Sarah lived in was one of the familiar terraced houses in Ladbroke Grove. Built in the 1890s, it was a modest structure with 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a narrow kitchen. The house wasn't luxurious: old furniture, worn carpets, occasionally leaky taps, but it was a real home for Sarah and her children. Jake would tell his school friends about their house. Emma would play with her dolls in her small pink room, and both considered this place the center of their world. Sarah was trying to support her family through part-time cleaning jobs. She would wake up early, prepare the children for school, then clean luxury offices in Kensington, pick up the children from school in the afternoon, and go to restaurant cleaning in the evening. Her weekly working hours reached 50 hours, but due to minimum wage, her earnings barely covered basic needs. London's rising living costs were suffocating Sarah. Rent was £1,500, electricity and gas bills £300, food expenses £400, children's school costs £200. To cover monthly expenses of £2,400, she had an income of £2,200. She had to run a deficit every month, borrowing from credit cards. For the past 3 months, Sarah's situation had deteriorated dramatically. Her main employer, Crystal Clean Cleaning Company, had to cut its staff in half due to post-COVID financial difficulties. Sarah was among those laid off. She was trying to find new work, but finding flexible working hours with 2 small children was nearly impossible. The weekly £180 benefit she received from Job Centre Plus wasn't enough to cover rent and living expenses. Sarah had tried to explain her situation to Thornfield, asked for time and proposed a payment plan, but Thornfield had rejected all her attempts, simply saying, "Pay rent or leave." Sarah didn't want to change neighborhoods for her children's sake. Jake had friends here, and Emma was happy at her nursery. This house meant not just shelter, but stability for them.
When Thornfield arrived at his office that morning, he gave clear instructions to his assistant Jennifer Williams. "We're evicting Sarah Mitchell today. We've shown enough patience." Jennifer Williams, 28, a Cardiff University law graduate, was a young and idealistic woman. She had started working in the real estate sector to find employment, but what she witnessed disturbed her. She found Thornfield's approach to tenants too harsh, but she needed the job. "Mr. Thornfield, the woman has 2 small children. In these weather conditions, leaving them on the street?" "Jennifer," Thornfield cut her off with a stern and decisive voice. "This isn't a charity. It's a profit-oriented real estate business. If you approach things emotionally, you'll fail in this sector. A tenant who doesn't pay rent is no different from a squatter." Although Jennifer felt guilty, she couldn't object. She needed her job due to student loan debt and care expenses for her father. Thornfield took 2 security guards from Hamilton Security with him. Dave Thompson and Gary Mills, former police officers, frequently worked on such evictions. Both disliked this work, but did their duty as long as it was legal. At 10 a.m., Thornfield's black Range Rover parked in front of Sarah's house. When Sarah saw the luxury car from the window, her heart began beating rapidly. She had known this moment would come in recent weeks, but she wasn't psychologically prepared. The children hadn't gone to school because Jake had a slight fever and Emma didn't want to be separated from her brother. When the door was knocked, Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Thornfield, in his expensive cashmere coat, stood at the door with 2 large security guards beside him. Thornfield's cold gray eyes reflected no empathy. "Mrs. Mitchell," said Thornfield in a voice as cold as ice, "you have 3 months' rent arrears, totaling £4,500. We have obtained a legal eviction order. You need to vacate the property immediately. Today."
Sarah's voice trembled, her head spinning. "Mr. Thornfield, please give me a little more time. I have children. We have nowhere to go in this cold weather. This is no longer my problem, Mrs. Mitchell. We gave you opportunities. You didn't take advantage of them. In the business world, results matter." Jake and Emma were watching from behind their mother with curiosity and fear. Jake could sense the panic in his mother's voice, while Emma began crying without understanding what was happening. "Please," said Sarah, with tears filling her eyes, her voice breaking from desperation, "give me 1 more week. I'm starting a new job on Monday. I guarantee I'll make my payment." "Too late, Mrs. Mitchell," said Thornfield without softening at all. "I don't want empty promises. Pack your belongings. I'm giving you 30 minutes. Sarah began preparing her children in desperation. Jake asked his mother with worried eyes, "Mom, where are we going? Can I bring my toys?" Sarah, trying to hold back her tears, answered, "I don't know, sweetheart, but you can take your favorite toys." Emma, clutching her doll, asked, "Mom, why are you crying? Will we come back home?" 30 minutes later, Sarah and her children were on the street with their few belongings,
2 old suitcases, several plastic bags, the children's toys, and basic clothing. Thornfield immediately locked up the house and called a locksmith to change the locks. Neighbors gathered in the cold weather watched the situation with sorrow and anger, but no one dared to intervene. Thornfield's power, authority, and legal dominance were clear. Additionally, everyone lived in fear of not being able to pay their own rent. Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old neighbor, watched from her window crying, but knew she couldn't help. Mr. Patel, the neighbor across the street, was barely earning enough for his own family.
"Mom, where are we going?" asked Emma while shivering, her small hands frozen. Sarah couldn't answer. The processes for finding temporary shelter in London were very long, the bureaucracy heavy, and there was a real possibility of spending the night on the streets. She had been waiting on the council housing list for 18 months, but her turn hadn't come. Just then, a man walking from the other end of the street noticed this unusual scene. This middle-aged man, wearing a dark navy coat with a serious but kind facial expression, was Keir Starmer. He had witnessed this drama while walking home from a party meeting at Westminster. Starmer approached and tried to understand the situation. The children's crying, the woman's desperation, and the man's harsh attitude showed the seriousness of the situation. "What's the problem? Can I help you?" Starmer asked, turning to Sarah. Thornfield didn't welcome this unexpected intervention at all. He didn't want the incident to escalate. "This is entirely a personal and legal matter, sir. It doesn't concern you in any way," he said with authority. Starmer felt deep empathy when he saw the crying children and Sarah in her desperate state. As a father of 2 children, this scene deeply affected him. "These children are going to be left in the cold. This is absolutely inhumane," Starmer said resolutely. "I don't know who you are, sir, but this is completely illegal eviction procedure. We have the necessary documents," Thornfield said, going into defensive mode. Starmer turned to Sarah and asked in a gentle voice, "What's happening to you? Can you explain your situation?" Sarah, with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, explained, "I've been unemployed for 3 months. I have rent arrears. They evicted us from our house. My children and I have nowhere to go. I'm waiting on the council list, but there's no result." Starla turned to Thornfield and asked, "Are you providing alternative accommodation for this family, a temporary solution?"
Thornfield laughed dismissively. "I'm not a charity, sir. This is a commercial business. I'm getting rid of a customer who doesn't pay rent. But this is a humanitarian issue. There are small children here. We're in the middle of winter. This doesn't concern me. A tenant who doesn't pay rent faces the consequences. Emotional approach has no place in the business world." Starmer's patience was exhausted. Such cold-bloodedness seemed incredible to him. Is humanity really so easily forgotten? Thornfield looked with suspicion and a sense of superiority. "Excuse me, but who are you to give me moral lessons?" Starmer clearly revealed his identity. Keir Starmer, Labour Party leader and leader of the opposition. The colour instantly drained from Thornfield's face, as if struck by lightning. Learning that the person facing him was Britain's most powerful opposition leader had a shocking effect on him. I'm just doing my job, using my legal rights," Thornfield stammered, going into defensive mode. "Is your job leaving families with children in the cold in the middle of winter, Mr. Thornfield?" Starmer immediately took out his phone and reported the situation to local council and social services. Then he shared what was happening live on his Twitter account. "Right now in Kensington, a mother with 2 small children is being thrown onto the street due to rent arrears. The estate agent absolutely refuses to provide alternative solutions. This is the reality of Britain's housing crisis. #housing crisis. This post went viral within minutes.
The hashtag Sarah Mitchell began trending, and thousands of people reacted to the situation. Thornfield was in panic. He hadn't calculated that the situation would grow to this extent and become a media sensation. "Mr. Starmer, perhaps we can find a solution. Let's talk," he attempted with an anxious voice. "It's too late now, Mr. Thornfield," Starmer said resolutely. "This matter is now in the public agenda." Starmer immediately called social services to arrange emergency temporary accommodation for Sarah and her children. He also provided legal counsel and gave information about their legal rights.
By 3 p.m., the incident had spread across all social media. The hashtags Thornfield Shame and Sarah Mitchell were trending topics on Twitter. Thousands of people condemned Thornfield and sent support messages to Sarah. BBC News, ITV, Sky News, and Channel 4, all major news channels covered the story as their main news. News bulletins were prepared with headlines like, "Estate Agent's Ruthlessness." In BBC's report, the correspondent said, "This incident reveals the extent of London's housing crisis. The dramas experienced by families with children are heartbreaking." Thornfield's phone was ringing non-stop. Angry messages were coming from his clients, business partners, and even his own family. Photos of his office were being shared on social media, with boycott calls being made. That evening on television news, Sarah Mitchell gave an interview with her children while staying safely in a hotel. "I had fallen into despair. I didn't know what to tell my children." Keir Starmer appeared like an angel at that moment. If he hadn't been there, we would have spent the night on the streets. Starmer held an emergency press conference at Westminster that evening. What Sarah Mitchell experienced is the bitter reality of Britain's housing crisis. Thousands of families are at the mercy of ruthless estate agents like Marcus Thornfield. We urgently need much stronger legal regulations to protect tenants. This speech became the beginning of the Tenants Rights Act. The bill proposed by Starmer included the following provisions: ban on evictions during winter months, November through March; mandatory alternative accommodation for families with children; mandatory education on tenant rights; ethical codes and certification for estate agents; high penalties for violations of tenant rights. 3 months later, Thornfield's real estate empire collapsed. 80% of clients terminated their contracts, banks increased loan interest rates, and ultimately, he was forced into bankruptcy. He was banned from the real estate sector.
Sarah, meanwhile, found a new job, was allocated social housing from Lewisham Council, and built a new life with her children. A year later, Starmer and Sarah met again in Hyde Park. Sarah now had a stable job, and her children were happy in their new schools. "That day, you didn't just save our lives," said Sarah. "You changed the entire system." "No, Sarah. That day, you changed the system. Your courage and resilience changed laws. You became hope for thousands of families." Thanks to the Tenants Rights Act, 15,000 families were protected in its first year. Sarah's story became a real turning point for housing justice in Britain. This story shows that sometimes the greatest changes arise from the most painful experiences. The injustice Sarah Mitchell experienced led to the birth of laws that strengthened the rights of millions of tenants. And Marcus Thornfield's ruthlessness ultimately brought about his own downfall. True justice begins with standing by the powerless, and sometimes a mother's tears can lead to the change of an entire system.